Hi, and welcome to episode 3 of the Unstuck Club with myself, Jodene, and Di. And today, what I really want to do is jump in and hand over to Di really soon, because it's been a big week, Di, with lots going on. How are you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, when we started this Unstuck journey, and I know that there's a huge misconception that people who do the kind of work that we do, whether it's coaches, healers, counselors, whatever, that we have our shit together. Excuse my French. And we so do not. And the interesting thing is, it's like the moment you and I said, okay, let's do this podcast, it's like our journeys just like catapulted forward. So, to give everyone a kind of a shortened version of what's happening, I've struggled since the beginning of the year to get focused, especially around the work that we do and that I do as a grief guide. And what had been happening was every day I religiously wrote on my to-do list all the important things relating to my work. And every night they would get transferred to the next day. And I found myself for hours just distracting myself with mindless things. I have depression in my family going back a couple of generations. So I'm always very conscious of it. And this last week, I really hit a major wobble. There's also financial issues, and it all just came crashing in. And this is going to lead to the question that I'm going to ask you, which is this episode's topic around Unstuck. And I reached out to a friend of mine she's a Reiki student of mine. She's a wonderful psychologist, because I knew I needed more than just going for a sound journey or a Reiki session with someone else. And I started with her this week. And did the floodgates open. In the last episode, we spoke about how our self-limiting beliefs are held in the cells of the body. I thought I was pretty in touch with my body. Well, let me tell you, this psychologist asked me a few questions, and within seconds, I was ugly crying in her arms like I have not cried for a very long time. And one thing about this podcast that Joe and I started is we keep it real. We don't pretend that we have our stuff together. So I'm being honest with all of you listening here. These sobs felt like they came from the depths of my soul. And it was interesting when she was listening to me, because initially she just let me talk. And she said to me, eventually she looked at me and she said, "You have an awful lot of shoulds in your conversation. I should have been more aware and done differently. I should be doing this. I should be doing that." And, I think for the first time, because those of you who ever receive any of Jodene's correspondence know that she always ends it with, "Be kind to yourself." And she looked straight at me and she said, "Can you just for this weekend be kind to yourself?" And it was a huge aha moment. And what I love about these journeys that we go through life, and we often say that it's like the layers of an onion. You think you've dealt with one lot of stuff, and the next layer appears and more tears. It's the tears that bring the healing. And I know, Joe, with some of your clients, our clients, they struggle to get in touch with their emotions. But at the same time, I've been reading this book. Where is it? The Happiness Equation by Neil Pasricha. And in it, he asks a question and he says, when you do something, whatever it is, can you do it for you? Are you doing it for you? Or are you doing it because it's expected of you? It's always been that way. One of the things that came up with me is how much responsibility I take on in my entire life, going back to childhood. I have to be the responsible one. You spoke about irresponsibility in the last episode. Mine is I have to be the responsible one. Whether it's the thing of being the eldest, I'm not sure, but my entire life, my homework is to write down all the times, not only when I felt I needed to take things on, but when I did it alone, because my big thing that has come up is doing everything alone. And it's actually huge. And then we got this beautiful message from one of our listeners sharing her insights and ahas from episode 2. And she said the same thing. She said, I need to do it for me. And in the book, he talks about you can't have social success, sales success, and almost personal success all at the same time. He said you have to choose. And I think that personal success is the thing that goes on the back burner. And I think the personal success is the thing that brings us the most joy. When you're chasing the number of likes, the number of shares, the number of followers, or the money in your bank account. And that was an aha for me, that the moment I attach a financial thing, a value to what I do, it's no longer a joy. It becomes another responsibility. So this work with this beautiful therapist is ongoing. But I cannot tell you, Joe, how lighter I felt after this meltdown. I was shocked at the depth of the meltdown, first of all. I mean, I knew it was coming. I especially didn't wear mascara because I knew I could feel it building all week. But I was stunned at the depth of pain that came out. And I realized that for us to get unstuck, we have to go into that pain. But one of the things, and it's my question to you this episode, one of the things that kept coming up is this: I regret that why did I do this? Why did I do, that voice? And I think that regrets and guilt, we know they don't serve any purpose, but those voices are there. And I think that's one of the biggest things to keeping us stuck. So we're either worrying about what's coming, but then we just start rehashing and beating ourselves up because I should have done things differently, and I regret now not making different choices.
Right. So, first of all, thank you for the bravery and the transparency. And we also hadn't really spoken about it that much. You also needed that space. That it got to such a point where it was all melted out and all came out. So thank you for sharing, because it's a beautiful way to go through this process. And then the other thing, before I go any further, I want confirmation from you for everybody else that that I don't do regret.
I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that you didn't. Well, how do you not? That's my question.
Okay. Because when I started to create all the things, I have worked through so many tools from other people. I really and truly have. And there's just a part of me that kind of goes, that doesn't sit well with me. That doesn't sit well with me. Then I studied into how does the mind actually work? How does the ego voice work? All those different processes. And then how I completely always say, in those steps of faith, there is acceptance. It is what it is. So maybe when I say it like that, then you can resonate with me, and how often I say, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So I trip over myself, which will be another whole episode, right? On how we actually trip over ourselves. But you can really ask me anything, and I will not go into regret. It took me ages to get there, and it actually took realizing we found out my dad was sick. right? And my relationship with my dad wasn't fabulous. And I was with an incredible teacher at that time who said, you've been given a time frame to shift your relationship so that when he passes, there's no regret. It was an incredible opportunity to be able to do that and to work into that. So so lovingly, everyone knows when I say lovingly, and if you've only just been introduced to the Unstuck Club, you will hear that when I say lovingly, it's because the ego needs care and compassion in order to hear the next thing that I'm going to say, right? Regret is the great ploy of the ego. It is the smartest way for the ego to keep you distracted because the ego, and when we talk about the ego, when you're born, right, you are born with this beautiful mind that is developing, and you are born with these traits that define you, okay? And then you are born with empty filing cabinets in your mind. And as things happen, the ego it starts to file all the different things, the ego being the voice of the victim and the voice of the child, right? And those filing cabinets get really, really full of all the things that are the could haves, should haves, would haves. So the ego always goes back. Then when you create your to-do list and you know, because Di, you're going to tell me that feeling because you and I spent a beautiful time together in December planning all these things that are going to make 2024 so incredible, right? As you do that, the ego is the one that goes back into that filing cabinet and goes, oh, no, this could happen. You should have done that. It is the great ploy. And it takes a fortune. It's not to say that you bottle it all up and you don't deal with it. It's very important that when it comes up, to get to another step in the steps of faith is that intention. To understand why is that the place that the ego goes to. So I always say this. Everyone needs a good dose of therapy. Everyone needs some type of coach or whatever it is. But everybody needs a person, their person, someone who you can just say the things that are rattling around in your head so that you can hear yourself say it, because our mind is made up in those compartments that we have, that filing cabinet that we have, that is the irrational mind. But when we're in that beautiful present moment, connecting into who we authentically are, then we are in the rational mind, our rational, calm, present mind. And you can only be in the present mind or in the rational mind when you are present. And it's literally a tug of war. And that's why I love where you're at. And I say that so gently. It's where I love. I love that you're there because you understand yourself well enough to know that there is something wrong with this resistance, and that's why you went to go and see someone, right? You don't want to be there. The ego doesn't actually want to keep us stuck. That's why I'm so protective. When I do any level of coaching, one of the first things that I do is I say, that's why my signature is be kind to yourself, because that unkindness fuels the ego the whole time. So the kinder you are to yourself, the less internal resistance there is. And then the ego doesn't have to always go back into that filing cabinet. I feel so emotional talking about it because this is what I deal with all the time. All the time. All I do is I just sit with people and I just go, don't be that unkind to yourself. So that is what the coulds and the shoulds and the woulds do. It is your ego's protective system. It's the way that it protects you to not do the next brave thing.
So I know that you feel very strongly because there is a school of thought that says, you must kill the ego, which I don't agree with because it's the ego that drives us forward to do things, to succeed, to create. But you do feel very strongly, because I know there's probably some people listening going, you don't need the ego. and there's also a school of thought that talks about the lower ego and the higher ego, which I think is what we're all aspiring to connect with. But if you take it back, I love the analogy of the empty files. I love that. That, you can go, this is just stuff in a file. Actually, I can, what's it? Alt Control delete. I don't have, it's old, it's obsolete. But so the ego actually is protecting the child or the victim. Is that
so? The ego is protecting the memory of either feeling like the child or feeling like the victim.
Okay.
And the child is that feeling of life is someone's going to abandon me. I'm going to have to do life alone. It is scary. It is a cold place. It is a lonely place. I don't know if I have it within me to survive on my own. The child then creates things like codependence or blocking off that heart chakra and getting too independent. So that's what you were talking about. This drive for independence comes from that child going, okay, well, I know that life is this cold, lonely place, and I felt abandoned at some point. I felt like I had to survive on my own at some point. And the simplest little thing can trigger the child or the victim. So mom could have picked you up late from school. There's a viral video that's going around at the moment, which is this little girl. She's so sassy. She's absolutely divine, but her mom came late and she's like, I don't want to talk to you. You picked me up late. And whatever I watch, whenever I'm engaged in anything that I'm watching, I'm always looking for the archetypes, right? And I'm looking at what's going to be triggered. That's why life fascinates me, the way it does. That is going to trigger something within that little girl. It will always be there. And
so anytime there's even as an adult, then anytime like she's standing outside a restaurant waiting and someone hasn't arrived, she goes straight back to being 7 years old.
Heaven help that person who is not absolutely dumb.
So I have a question, because you've mentioned faith, and I'm not sure that we've actually gone through the steps in the podcast yet. Mm-hmm. So if I take that, so the acceptance I understand, but if I take the faith acronym and apply it to where I am now, because there is a lot going on for me. I really feel like this is a huge crossroads of shifts to really step into a new chapter. So if I was to apply that, so it's focus. So the F of the faith is focus. So say I'm a client, how would you coach me to apply faith exactly where I am now?
Okay. So you have your time that you are going to go to the therapist, right? And see the therapist, and you have a certain amount of homework that you need to do for that. Okay.
Yeah.
So you need to commit that mental time to doing that.
Okay.
The rest of the time, the ego you cannot let your mind just do whatever your mind wants to do. We need to learn to manage our minds. Most of the time, our mind is managing us, right? Mm-hmm. So I have committed time. There's homework where I'm going to deal with it, right? And there is time that I'm actually going to see the therapist, and I'm also going to either have my voice note, my tablet with me or something. So if I do have an aha moment, I'm going to jot it down. But I'm not going to spend an endless amount of time letting this float around in my mind. Okay. So my thing is, what do you do that brings you joy, that you can focus on, that takes your mind out of that, and you genuinely have the capacity to focus on something else? Going for your walks, listening to music, cooking in the kitchen, being with those precious, precious animals of yours, so that you don't just have this endless stream of unconscious thought.
Okay.
That's focus. That's
Yeah.
focus. It's light a candle and stare at the flame. I know that people think that that is just such a silly thing to do. But if you actually light a candle and stare at the flame and monitor the short amount of time that you actually have the ability to concentrate on that flame, and you just keep on bringing your mind back. That is focus. Make sense? Okay. So that's our focus.
Okay.
So acceptance is a dialogue that you really need to have with your ego that goes like this. It is what it is. I can't do anything about what I did before. I don't have the control over anybody who did anything before. It is what it is. Where to from here? And that's a very important part of it, right? It is what it is. I am where I am. There is no changing it. However, what do I know about myself that I can do something different right now? And I wish that more people layered their therapies and all their people that they work with, because I want to remind you that you have a self-worth list. So you don't put down the time with the therapist and go, okay, now I'm with Jodene and I need to remember that. That's what a lot of people do. Okay, I'm with this person, I'm going to stop this person. I'm with this person, I'm going to stop this person. The layering work is where such potential lies, because she's going to give you the most amazing tools. However, you are sitting with that answer to the acceptance. Your ego doesn't keep quiet until it knows that there is something within you that it can rely on. And that's why we sift through the traits, right? You've been through the process of sifting through all your traits, and we've separated the traits where you know you're worthy. On some days you might not feel so anchored into that trait, but it's the same as it's exactly the same as when a storm comes along, everything seems uncertain. I'm in the Cape now. I'm not used to these gusts of wind, and it feels like the window is going to fall out of, the window pane. It's not, right? So that's a very important part of acceptance. And it is a frustrating part with my clients, because a lot of them don't want to get to that point. And then that's when another layer of work comes in, where we actually need to go into that emotional space. What has happened to your emotional well-being that you can't get to that space of accepting that it is what it is? And that the ego loves the blame game, because if you do the blame game, you're not going to move forward. So sometimes we sit in acceptance for quite a while. Okay. And obviously, because you and I work together so much, I want you to watch the ego, and I want you to say to me, I keep on going back to those shoulds, coulds, woulds. I keep on going back, right? We'll do a couple of things to understand that. Yeah.
So in other words, if I had, like, I'm sitting doing something and then this little voice goes, I could literally, so if the voice says, you shouldn't be doing this work because you're not qualified enough, or you're not clever enough, whatever it is, I could actually take my self-worth list and go, well, F you, ego, because actually I have this and this and this. So it goes back to actually taking that action in the present moment and not allowing these thoughts. Or I suppose even just to message you and going, I'm sliding down this rabbit hole, just please throw me a lifeline and pull me out. And I think that's what I learned this last week, is we need to ask for help before we get to the point that I did. And again, it's falling into that trap of everyone sees me as strong. Where I live, I mean, I didn't create the kind of network and the connections and the reputation that I have here. It's something that just happened. But people, it's the one phrase that's said to me most often: you are so strong and you're amazing and I don't know how you do it. Well, you buy into that. And then it's hard to show that vulnerability and go, I'm not actually coping. So I think, yeah, if there is anyone out there listening who is really struggling internally, reach out to someone. It doesn't have to be a therapist, but somebody. I watched a Simon Sinek video the other day that was so beautiful. They have a phrase within their team. If somebody needs an ear, they'll send someone a message and go, have you got 8 minutes for me? And that's the signal that that person needs help. And I thought that was so beautiful. Have you got 8 minutes for me? And maybe I'm going to be doing that to you. Have you got 8 minutes for me?
Absolutely.
Because we just, and I think that's where we're stuck. We just don't ask for help anymore because it's seen as weakness.
Completely. I want to just take a step back and gently scold you for saying if you ego or screw you ego or whatever. That
okay, yeah, I hear you.
We're in a live coaching session right now, people. We're in a live coaching session. Those are the very statements that keep that ego in protective mode the whole time. Okay. So it's to do the absolute opposite. It's to actually do the opposite. I hug myself so often. I really do. It takes a lot to do brave things. I was chatting to someone else and she said to me, she said to me, well done and you're brave, feels condescending to her. And it's an interesting take because I know that how often I say to myself, well done, and that was so brave. Because I believe that that's an undercurrent of not wanting to allow ourselves to be that vulnerable. And when we don't allow ourselves to be that vulnerable, our guard is up. And what happens when our guard is up is we are always vibration. So this energetic vibration is going to be in fight or flight, right? Emotional fight or flight. So as soon as you say something unkind to yourself, you go into emotional fight or flight. So really, you've got your one set of homework from the therapist. The other set of homework that I really want you to sit with is to catch, because it's going to happen. The ego is determined. The ego is so feisty. It is absolutely determined to make sure that you just stay within that filing cabinet of the memories. And the reason is because outside of the memories is the unknown. And there's not enough self-trust, which is another one of the steps of faith, which is the T part, is trust. There's not enough self-trust that you will be able to take on the unknown, which is also sitting in those beautiful traits of yours. So yes, go into the traits, see which one it is, because you're layering this the whole time. You're consistently layering how you are building a better relationship with yourself.
Okay. And so where does so what sort of intention then would I be working this process?
Intention is beautiful. It's not always easy to do it on your own, right? Unless you can get into a space of really trusting that you can pull yourself into the present moment. But it's that asking why. I gave a client such a beautiful exercise between her and her partner. They had an opening statement, right? And then the other partner answered, and all that they were allowed to say to each other was why. Nothing else, just why.
Okay.
Why is a rational question. It pulls the mind into the present moment, and the mind has to think about it. And how I see it working in the animated way that I see life is that everything pauses and it gives the rational mind the opportunity to look into the subconscious, go into that subconscious mind and to flip through that filing cabinet, and then to start and say, oh, this is an inkling, this is a clue as to why. Sometimes when I'm with clients, I'll say why, and they'll go, um, I, I don't know. And what I'll say is just say what you're thinking right now. Right now. Like you can't even think anymore. Say what you're thinking in this moment, because that's what leads it on. So if you can, it's that when that should comes up, when that question comes up, when it comes up, to then say, why is this, dear mind, and be very careful how you speak to yourself, right? Why is this, dear ego, why is this the place you went to now? Why is this the thought that you pulled up?
Okay, interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
and then
it's
no, carry on.
It's when you start to understand how the mind works, and I know there's layers of neuroscience to it, and that's why I always try and keep it as absolutely simple as possible. It is a really slick functioning machine, right? That machine is it's programmed, like the antivirus in that are all your emotions. So if you don't have your emotions set up right, you don't have a healthy antivirus, and that's exactly how it's going to work. You got to keep that clean. You got to always know how you feel. And there's an avoidance. There is an avoidance to get into how we feel. We don't want to unpack it too much.
Yeah, sure.
But it's amazing what happens when you tell yourself the truth. And when Greg and I started Lifeology, so we have a foundation. When you go onto the website, it says this is the foundation of everything that we do and how we function within Lifeology. We have the foundation, and it all starts with tell yourself the truth.
Yeah,
that's how it starts.
Yeah.
Just tell yourself an inkling of truth. It doesn't have to be something that is life-changing. Just be honest about how you feel. And that's where I get so frustrated with the happiness. I call it the happiness movement, and all of this, the positivity movement, and all of this manifestation stuff, where it's like, what it's done is it's gotten people to go, thoughts become things. I can't feel sad. I can't think about this. I can't let my head go there. But if you don't, then you don't have that correct antivirus, right, within your mind, because your emotions, you haven't tapped into your emotions. You're not being honest with yourself about how you feel. And actually then you aren't creating what you want, because you aren't starting at the base of it, which is tell yourself the truth about how you feel, which is the base of it.
That could be like a major, I think this would be like a major unstuck tip, is if you want to get unstuck from where you are in your life at the moment, you have to tell yourself the truth.
Absolutely.
Which I think is what I did. I'm afraid. I feel hopeless. I feel helpless. I'm alone, which was a big thing that came up. I didn't realize, I always think of, when I say I'm alone, I think of John's death. But, when I look back over the last 5 years, my sister relocated back to the UK, so I'm completely alone in this country. Then my best friend in the world moved, I always say, to the arse end of the world, sorry, New Zealand, but it's very far from South Africa. We were like so close. She left. In fact, she left the country like 3 weeks after I buried John. Then I alone packed up our family home and moved to a whole new life. And now when I'm looking back, I see how many times I've done things alone. And there is this gut-wrenching, it's not loneliness. I'm not lonely. And I really want to emphasize that. There's a huge difference between being alone and being lonely. But I didn't, until I was honest about it, only then did this absolute volcano of emotion surface.
So, very interestingly, I can't do coaching with anyone if I don't have that date of birth, right? It's like that's from the get-go. I need that date of birth because that moment of birth creates your soul contract straight away. And that's always the thing. I always have like a session with people before to see whether they want to work with me. And it literally comes down to this foundational. If you do not believe that, then, we're going to not be able to work together because I'm always going to go back to your date of birth. It is the blueprint of who you are. And I really, really, with so much love that I have for you, you are, when it comes to the traits that create how you find direction in your life through your numerology, you are the innovator. You are a one. The key thing to the one is the ability to navigate life. The one is the leader. The one is the one. If we take it and we have a look at the board around a boardroom table, right? The one is going to be the person who they say, "Oh, you can manage this on your own. You have shown enough that you can manage it on your own." So you are born this way. Right? You are born this way. However, there is emotional turmoil in all the different ways that it happened, and those are the things that with the therapist, with understanding yourself through the process of flow, all those different things. So in that, this is why it's so fundamental to remember who you are. This is what self-awareness is, right? This is what self-awareness is. Like you need that self-worth list really close, because if you pick up that self-worth list now, you're going to see all the places where that independence is coming in. And what you need to look at is, if I'm born this way, why has it created so much of a wounding?
Yeah, that and I mean, this week I know the innovator, and again, your time, the timing this week of the support that's come in has been quite mind blowing. You doing the voice notes on the group about our life paths, and my first thought was, I feel so disconnected from the innovator. When I heard all those things, I was like, that is so not where I am at the moment. And I know that it is a part of me. If I look back over my life and the things that I've done and I've created and I've brought in, but I'm so disconnected from that, which interests me. So it is. I think the journey now of getting unstuck is to understand the emotional side and to create space for it. I think I'm very good at pushing it to one side and like, okay, you know what, I'm strong, I'm resilient, I don't need to worry about that rubbish kind of thing. But as I well know, and as I teach, is like, it stays inside you, it doesn't go anywhere. And I think that's the biggest thing to getting unstuck, is to know that all these feelings, thoughts are still in us, that which is where the work that I do with what we do comes in, realigning the energetic blueprint, so that that all those aspects of you flow, and you can start to live the life that you came here to live. So it's been fascinating. This whole week has just been like, wow.
And so brave. And I'm never going to stop saying that, because it really is so brave. Also, in that beautiful language that you're using for yourself, you are strong and you are resilient, right? The stronger you are and the more resilient you are, actually, the braver you will be to face the emotion and tell yourself the truth. It's one of those misconceptions. Once again, that's why I'm so protective of the ego, because it's the misunderstanding of the ego. That's why I'm so protective of vulnerability, because it's the misunderstanding of vulnerability. So actually, the more you anchor in that you are strong and that you are resilient and all those traits that you feel have become a shield, when you Give yourself permission to understand, actually, when I truly anchor into that, that is what will allow me to be more vulnerable, be more open to emotion,
Okay.
to my emotion. Yeah.
Well, I'll keep you all posted on this
Yes,
journey. It's a big one.
absolutely,
It's a big one.
absolutely. Yeah. That was thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being. I'll just now it's playing in my head because I just want to say thank you for being so vulnerable, and it's true. Thank you for being so vulnerable. I also, our listener who wants to remain anonymous, which we absolutely will always respect. We are so grateful for that message that came in, for the feedback, and also just expressing your realizations as you went through everything. It means a lot. And I believe that this is the power that's going to kick in with the Unstuck Club. Is life's going to happen. Someone's going to send us a question. I'm going to have my days. You're going to have your days, and this is just how we're going to process it and unpack it and be here for as many people as possible and really show up for ourselves, right? Because there's a lot of unstuckness for us to each do for ourselves.
Yeah. And also, I mean, she gave us some beautiful questions, which we're going to bring in. We still need to go back and really listen and make notes. But I think the one thing with this podcast that I love is that it's completely unscripted. I mean, when Joe and I jump on to record, we have no plan. We don't go, okay, this week we're going to be talking about this. Something will have come up, and one of us will message the other and go, okay, this has come up for me. I think this would be good to chat about. But this conversation unfolds. It absolutely, and I love it. I love the simplicity. I love the beauty of how this just is unfolding each week. This little spot in front of the screen is becoming my happy place every 2 weeks.
Amazing. Good.
Okay.
Right. So that's episode 3 of the Unstuck Club.
It is, yes.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
It is. And if there's so many different ways to get hold of either Di or myself, drop a message, send a voice note, just find a way to contact us. I'm a big believer in effort. When people say to me, I've referred someone to you, and they say to me, will you reach out to them? I always say no, because it is the effort that it takes to reach out to Di or to me, or to put yourself in that position of, I am worthy enough. I find myself worthy enough to find the effort and find the number and find the email address and get in touch. When you go to my WhatsApp, it actually says please disturb. That is my status. It says please disturb. So you can find my number, you can find Di's number, email address, any of that kind of stuff. I'm going to put it in the comments so it's easy to get hold of us. We know that it will never be abused. And we'll chat to you in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, and we do have a Facebook group. For those of you who are on Facebook, there is the Unstuck Club Facebook group, which you're welcome to join, where we also share the links to the podcast, which is on Apple and Spotify. And Jo's the tech person. She handles all of that. But I think it is, the takeaway is like just reaching out is that first brave step. It's the bravest thing you can do, is just to reach out to anybody and go, I'm not coping. So if today's episode has encouraged you just to take that one step, then I think both of us are very, very happy. And oh, Jo, the H in faith is happiness.
The H in faith is
we forgot about it.
and I just want to say one thing about happiness, is that happiness for me is absolutely so personal. You cannot figure out happiness. You can't read about it. You can't learn about it. It is so energetic. It is what makes you happy, and what makes you happy.
Yeah.
What you just what brings you joy, what makes you happy. And no one can tell you what makes you happy. And you cannot, you have to be in it to feel it.
And on that beautiful note, we will see you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.